Taylor McHargue, CBS, ESPN, former Rice quarterback, joins us every week, has a game or two, and he joins us on 365 Sports on Wednesdays. Taylor, let's start with the game in Ann Arbor, in the Big House, with Michigan, the defending national title holders, 110,000 plus, and Texas, of course, who looked really, really good in their opening game against Colorado State.
Well, I think the first thing right off the top, Michigan's got some quarterback problems. That's what stood out to me. That's what I'm looking for most in this matchup. And then the second piece, I think Texas obviously took care of business against Colorado State, but the front that Michigan is going to present on the defensive side of the ball is still one of the best in college football. Quinn Ewers has shown he's really risen to the occasion in the biggest moments. I go back to Alabama a year ago. The games where he's struggled have really more been against teams where maybe they were heavy favorites. But I expect Texas to be prepared for this game. If they can keep him protected, keep him upright, and not have somebody in his lap, I think this line is maybe even a little bit favorable to Michigan. I thought they really looked poor on the offensive side of the ball. If Michigan can't create some turnovers on the defensive side, I think this has a chance to be more like a 2-score win for Texas.
Taylor, when you're looking at a team like Michigan who doesn't announce the starter until the day of the first game, do you see that as gamesmanship or more panic from a coaching staff?
I don't think my read on this, and they were pretty tight-lipped about it through most of the offseason, but my read was that it looked like they had really put all their eggs in the basket of Orji through the offseason and through camp, and he obviously didn't perform well enough in camp to give him the starting nod. There's a lot of programs that have done the same thing where they try to hide who the starter is going to be all the way through camp. But to me, again, it goes back to, for Michigan to have a chance in this game, they're going to have to get after the quarterback. They've got to figure out a way to get after Quinn Ewers. And a week ago, I know it was against Colorado State, but I thought that was one of the better performances really of the entire week one in terms of a team that took care of business against an inferior opponent that they should win big against. Look around the country at how many matchups like Oregon and Idaho, for example, that really struggled and sort of played with their food and didn't handle business the way that you would expect them to. I thought Texas came out, played well. But going back to your point on sort of the gamesmanship, it's not uncommon in college football these days. But my read on it again is I don't think Alex Orji did nearly well enough in camp or what they expected they were going to get out of him, and now they've got issues at the quarterback spot.
Taylor, did you get any eyes on Arch Manning's stint towards the end of that game?
Yeah, he looked good. It was nice to see him in a game. I know Texas fans were excited to see him in. Making plays off script. I think that's the thing that a lot's been made of his athleticism, but I still don't think people realize what a good athlete he is and the kind of element that he adds with his legs. Moved around, obviously, that first touchdown moving to his right, kind of an off-script play. They've got the best quarterback room in the country. I don't think that's that's not groundbreaking news. I think between Quinn Ewers and then Arch behind him, if anything were to happen to Quinn this season, which the last 2 seasons he's gotten banged up, it wouldn't surprise me at all if there really wasn't a step backwards or any sort of regression if Arch had to play meaningful snaps this year.
Taylor, Utah hosts Baylor this weekend in Salt Lake City. The Utes look really good. Cam Rising looked good. They got a couple of injuries, but the way that Coach Whittingham and that team goes about their business, they win. They could end up, depending on what happens in front of them, inside the top 10, which would be great for the Big 12. Your thoughts about Utah? I don't think Baylor has a chance to win this game unless Utah throws up on themselves, and they don't do that.
Yeah, you need Cam Rising to play poorly. You need to create some turnovers. I do think it looked like a more spirited effort, at least in week one for Baylor. But I think I agree with you. This is going to be a challenge. I think for Utah, there's a reason they're a favorite in the conference. You almost wonder, does it benefit Baylor if there's any sort of potential look-ahead spot? I know it's still a couple weeks until they have to go to Oklahoma State for Utah. But that's a really physical football team. Watched a little bit of their game Thursday night. I believe it was against Southern Utah, and obviously an inferior opponent, but they came out. They looked sharp. You've got to figure out a way to turn Cam Rising over. And in his whatever year this is of college football that he's playing, that's easier said than done. But But for Utah, that matchup, like we had Oklahoma State in week 1. That matchup coming up towards the end of the month, that to me is, if you just circle that for the entire Big 12 calendar, that may be the biggest game for the entire season, with Utah having to go to Oklahoma State in a couple weeks.
Taylor, which Oregon are we going to see this week? Are we going to see a scared or a kind of not scared, but wonky Oregon like we saw last week, or will they be focused and ready to take on a Boise State team that has one of the best players in the country on it?
Oregon moved the football well against Idaho almost all game. What killed them was third down penalties. They had so many drives where they're moving the ball well and they stall out and they don't come away with points. But regardless of how you slice it, that's an FCS opponent that it was a 3-point game in the fourth quarter. And I don't care what Oregon fans say about the performance. And sure, they did move the ball well. That's still a pretty underwhelming performance in week 1. They did not look motivated. It looked flat. Boise State on the other side, Maddox Madsen he was okay in week 1, but Ashton Genty, obviously the big storyline. I still think Boise State is going to score. I don't think they're going to score at the clip that they did against Georgia Southern. I would imagine Dan Lanning has his guys ready to go, and that you're hoping, if you're a Oregon fan, that was the shot in the arm that they needed to find some motivation, because if they come out and play as flat as they did a week ago with Shinty.
Whoop. We lost him. The Zoom link went out. We'll try to see if we can reestablish that, Garrett, either on your side or on his side. By the way, Zach Gelb had the Boise State quarterback on his show this week on CBS Sports. And so that'll be interesting he's going to join us today at 5:00 to kind of discuss Boise State and also Oregon, who, just kind of like won. And by the way, paid for it. And one of the polls dropped a pretty good ways. We got him back. I'm sorry about that, Taylor. Back to Boise State. You were talking about that game with Oregon.
Yeah, for Boise State, they will score at a better clip than Idaho did a week ago. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But for Dan Lanning and the Oregon staff, I think you're hoping, if you're an Oregon fan, that week 1 got their attention. You'll see a more spirited effort in week 2.
Taylor, what are your thoughts on what Florida State's rolling through right now with the 2 losses to start the year, and obviously a lot of talk about DJ Uiagalelei and his play or lack thereof?
I think Florida State has a number of issues, and it's not just DJU, who is not playing well. The inaccuracies that we saw at Clemson and at Oregon State, they're showing up again. But their defensive line, I mean, the defensive line, to me, going back to week 0 against Georgia Tech, got pushed around. Happened again this week against Boston College. I think it also, if you are a Florida State fan, you got to be really frustrated. And this sounds more like an excuse, but you got to be really frustrated with the schedule. Having to play 2 conference matchups back to back, and one of them being in Ireland. I don't think there's a program of Florida State's caliber shouldn't be doing that. Texas wouldn't do that. Alabama wouldn't do that. And Florida State fans have every right to be frustrated with not only that, but being put on standalone stages where this is worst case scenario, right? They were the only game on back-to-back weeks and lost both games. So now you've got the eyes of the world. And after they lost to Georgia Tech, I think you could see that was a tight football team that was not playing loose. They were not relaxed. So not only do they have issues that we've already talked about, but now everybody in the country has seen them. So look, Paul Feinbaum said the season's over. I don't know if the season's fully over, but their chances at the playoffs are over. 2 straight losses in ACC play to open the season when most schools have only played 1 game, and a lot of it was tune-up games for their peers. I think there's obviously a lot of frustration for Florida State fans, and it's warranted for sure.
Taylor, what were your thoughts about DJU as a thrower, as a passer, when he was at Clemson, and then, of course, at Oregon State? Because I saw a lot of chatter that night. It was easy because it was easy pickings because he was struggling. What were your thoughts about him as a quarterback?
Inaccurate downfield is kind of the biggest thing that stood out to me going, back to his days at Clemson. There's a reason that they, in both of these games so far for Florida State, have kept the ball near the line of scrimmage. The air yards per completion, I think it's still below 8 yards, 7-8 yards for most of their completions, and it's screens, it's quick game. You've seen the shot plays down the field where there were a couple against Georgia Tech where there's plays to be made and he doesn't hit them. You're asking if Florida State fans thought that they were getting a guy that's going to be able to put you on their back and throw for 350 yards. That's not the guy. Florida State also, to DJU's, to kind of stick up for him and defend him, there is not an elite talent at receiver. You do not have somebody on the outside that's your go-to guy that on deep shots is great in 50-50 scenarios. You don't have anybody in the slot that's super dynamic. So you're asking him to play near perfect in these situations where he's not capable of it. I don't know what – there was so much made of him this offseason that he was going to become this new look quarterback that can stand and deliver the ball downfield week in and week out and on those critical downs and under pressure. He was never that at Clemson, and he wasn't that at Oregon State either.
But every coach is out there when they see a talent like that, they can fix them, right? Sometimes, and it's hard. I think it's hard, especially when you got a kid like DJU who does all the right things, says all the right things, is the leader on the team, is a pretty humble dude. You have coaches that root for him, but sometimes it's hard to just pull the plug.
Well, and for Mike Norvell, that was the solution for a team that didn't have a great – you saw in the ACC championship and the Orange Bowl a year ago, there was not a ton of depth in that quarterback room to begin with. And so, look, the portal can solve a lot of problems at a lot of positions. But quarterback is challenging, and they went out and in a not very deep quarterback class. I would say DJU was still certainly in the top 5 of the transfer quarterbacks, but that doesn't mean that he's going to come in and play All-American Heisman level football. And for Florida State fans, I think that was some of the expectation, was there was going to be this massive leap, and he's just not that player. I think he's an average college quarterback, and it sounds like such an indictment because he's playing at Florida State where the expectation is through the roof, especially coming after last season and Jordan Travis. But that wasn't fair to DJU. He was never really that at Clemson, and he wasn't that at Oregon State either.
Hey, Taylor, you don't mind if we bring up the game you're at this week, but also I saw that kind of the disappointment. Sam Houston State, with what they've done, they're pretty good, but they beat Rice up pretty good. That was a disappointing start for them.
Yeah, gosh, man, I typed out like 10 different tweets and deleted all of them. I don't have a ton of good things to say right now. It's extremely frustrating. The roster doesn't look great. There's not a ton of talent, not a lot of talent at the skill positions, especially. That is Casey Keeler. Credit to Casey Keeler. His team was ready to go. They were more physical. They were more violent. But I also thought they had more talent at the skill positions. E.J. Warner, I had him a couple years ago against Temple, and I don't know if he's regressed or if it's in the system, but he was not sharp at all. And yeah, for a Rice program that, they're coming up on a decade of not having a winning season, there's absolutely some fatigue in the community of Rice football fans, which there's not a lot of to begin with.
Thank you, man. And the game you have, tease the game you have.
Yeah, we got San Jose State and Air Force. Should be a good one. Mountain West matchup. It's on in that 6 o'clock window, and there's like 50 games on, but we should have a good one. So if you want to watch some Mountain West action, we'll be on CBS Sports Network.
Well, we'll be able to ask you about Air Force next week when they come into Texas to play Baylor. Taylor, thank you as always. Appreciate your time. Taylor McHargue with us, color analyst, television analyst with us on college football and some of the games going on, of course, this week.